It's about saying yes to the community. And by saying yes to the community, guess what happened? The wholesale spigot turned back on because the head of LinkedIn from Global Food Service walked through one weekend and he called Bon Appetit. He said, I just had the best cup of coffee I've ever had. Why are you bringing me all these other roasters? I want Equator. And so I get a call Sunday night from Marcus Hartman. Can you come down to LinkedIn on Tuesday? Retail drives wholesale, right? Access, having people experience the brand, putting all those touch points out there.
That firsthand connection and way to directly communicate and have contact with the customer. And it is the wellspring from which everything comes. Hello and welcome to Food and Beverage Therapy Podcast, where we talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the coffee world. Learn from experts, CEOs, and leaders in the coffee industry on how they challenge themselves, continue to grow, innovate, and reinvent the landscape that makes up the business I love, coffee. I'm Jake Leonti, your host. I'm a coffee consultant, business expert, and entrepreneur that has worked at every link of the value chain over a 20-plus year career. I share insights, tips, and mantras to help you along your coffee journey. Hello and welcome to Food and Beverage Therapy Podcast. I want to start out today by letting everyone know right now that I have a new co-host and partner in crime on the podcast, Andy Trindle-Mersch, who is the VP of Coffee Operations and Sustainability at Philz Coffee in California. Andy is also a board member for the Coffee Coalition for Racial Equality. Beyond that, Andy is a longtime coffee pro, a wealth of knowledge, and I enjoyed talking to her. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much, Jake. I'm delighted and excited to be here.
And I should say to start off that the only reason that Andy agreed to do this is that I assured her that she could quit at any given moment. So that is the basis for the partnership right now.
Yes. And I also said I could be fired at any given moment. So that is our mutually exchanged relationship. We're all good.
Those are the checks and balances that are in place right now.
Yeah.
So today, I wanted to talk about, I just had a great conversation with Helen Russell, who is one of the co-founders of Equator Coffee, again, in your neighborhood. So you got the West Coast vibe going.
Yes, I love Helen. I've known her for many years. So yes.
That's so cool. We had, like I said, we had a great conversation and she loves and respects you. By the way, I bragged that you were joining the show and she had great things to say about you.
Oh, nice. Thank you. To echo back to her. Yes,
absolutely. She's going to hear it. That's the good news.
Great.
What's remarkable about Equator is the way that their employees love where they work and want to stay there. They don't just work there. They learn, they don't just work there, learn to move on to the next thing. They connect and really feel a part of something and want to stay there and keep learning and growing in this company, which is, very unique. And I just think that's a huge lesson to learn. And employee retention is something everybody's trying to do, but they don't seem to be going about it the right way. I don't know. What do you think?
Agreed.
What do you think the magic sauce is?
No, I was going to ask you now that you've gotten to deep dive with her, what did she say was their magic sauce? But I agree. It's something I've observed about them for many years. I have a number of, industry friends, not close friends, but industry friends who work there, who love it. They're excellent professionals. They're, smart industry people, and they're just always seem to be basically having a good time and staying. And I've always been very curious. So I don't know what it is. I know that I think Helen and Brooke both are have incredibly high integrity. So that is probably, I imagine, something that really appeals to people who work for them. I don't have any idea of like their pay or wages. And if that's a part, if they do profit share, if there's any sort of thing along those lines, or it's their values and how they lead. But what did she tell you? Because I want it.
Everybody wants it. I think that the tough part is that it's not, everybody normally wants like that replicable sort of corporate solution where you can just put it in a PowerPoint, and then you can have amazing retention. But part of it, I think, seems, one, like you said, that they're just genuine people and they genuinely care. One of the things she said was, even if you want to move on to some other job, just let me know and I'll be the first one to write you a recommendation. It's the idea that they're like genuinely invested in their staff and their personal growth and their development as human beings, even more so than just professionals. And I think, and it's, sometimes you hear that lip service from leaders and that's what they write their book about, but then you don't actually see it, actually happening in a company. And that seems to be the difference, is that they do genuinely care. And you can see this reflected back by the fact that their staff stays there so long, and I just think that that's really lovely. And it's so rare.
I know. And we try hard where I work, and we do some, I think more than most, we go well beyond paying lip service. It's also still hard to totally capture. So there's something that they have that is super special, I think. And they're not huge, right? Too. So perhaps there's an ability to control that closeness with your entire team when you're smaller, but they're powerful out in the world. I mean, they're leaders, they lead change and charge out there. And maybe that's part of it too. I feel like they were early to B Corp. They were early to try new products, and maybe that's exciting for people to be involved with as well. Maybe there's that.
Yeah, there's kind of that shared value piece where it's like, if you believe in those things, then you're going to be excited about that. And there's not that many companies that have gone to that extent, that have done the B Corp certification, that really kind of put their money where their values are. So being a part of that company is rare. And so there's not as much competition to attract you away from that if that's what your priority is.
I also, this may or may not be worth sharing out, but I mean, just for like how I became a fan. So Brooke, who may or may not remember this story, but that's Helen's partner, she gave me my first green bean sale back in like 1995. Wow. And they were just opening their business and I was just doing cold calls, and I'm a terrible salesperson, by the way. It was just really not my thing, though I've done a lot of it in green coffee over the years. But she was one of my very, very first customers, and she actually took my calls. I was calling a lot of people in the industry. I was really young. Most people would not even take my calls. Every time I called, she'd say, "Hi, how are you?" And she was always very professional and nice. And eventually she bought coffee and they paid their bills and they just did some of the basics. And so that was like way back in 94. And there's like this there's just a foundational goodness that I assume they've continued to operate their business like that. And that's probably what attracts good talent.
I'd say there's something there. And I absolutely don't believe that you were bad at selling. I think that people probably loved buying from you.
I would have great conversations, but I'm definitely not an aggressive salesperson. So it depends on if you're my boss. You're probably like, why is she on the phone for 4 hours, 5 times before she finally sells like a bag of coffee?
That's good stuff. That's relationships. So that's the long game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
Switching gears to another West Coast company, and I think I brought this up to you before. Blue Bottle, they release an exceedingly rare coffee from Yemen, which is on sale for $65 for 100 grams, and then they did it as an instant coffee.
Yes.
So some people might think this is crazy. I have conflicting thoughts. One is that taking a beautiful and unique, expensive coffee like this, and you kind of make it profane by downgrading the product to an instant. But then the other side of me says that the person who's more likely to buy this really expensive coffee maybe isn't super into brewing and isn't going to take all the time to go through it to truly make it perfect anyway. So by making it instant, it makes it one, more accessible, but also less likely to ruin it. You're going to get the actual flavor that you paid for. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I have to admit, when I first saw it, I was like, that is bizarre. It felt like it would be hard to sell it. Like, who would be the buyer for that? And then I also thought, well, that's cool. Like, hey, if they can get use the instant coffee format and get people to taste something. And to your point, that is one of the things that I always, empathize with all of us coffee professionals versus, say, wine and liquor professionals. They get to do all of their mastery and work on the field and all the way through in production and all of that. And then they put it out there and there's not much you can do. Like you're going to be able to taste
final product. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the final product. Now you might throw ice cubes or something in there that doesn't help or does, but it's done. So in coffee, it's always been so hard to have it go at risk. So I can do everything in my company to make sure we bought the right beans. I know our roasters are fantastic. I know we're keeping it fresh. And then someone buys it and they buy it pre-ground off, a shelf, and it's old, and then they don't put enough coffee in and it tastes terrible. And they're like, oh, that coffee is terrible.
Yeah, because you could spend the same amount of money on 100 grams of whole bean, Yemen, and then totally blow
Mess it up.
Yeah.
And I have actually messed up really good specialty coffee. One time my husband brewed a really nice one with cold water in the French press by accident. It was an accident, but I took it in the car.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I was like, today's coffee is terrible. I was like, it just is awful. And so
cold.
Effectively, he ruined a really nice coffee. So that's the instant, it's
there is that pressure too, right? It's like if you have a really expensive coffee, like I even feel the pressure sometimes, when somebody gives me a coffee and it's like, we want your feedback on it. And so you're like, I got to brew it perfectly. I'm going to do it according to the directions. And whoops, I put 4 extra grams of water in there. I've ruined everything. And, especially with something that's this expensive, you really kind of feel that. And so I think for somebody who, people just like to buy expensive things sometimes, right? And they want to get that
anyone who's going to buy that is generally someone who's just willing to spend money to try something unique.
Yeah, you want that experience. It's like, where else am I going to get Yemen coffee? And then boom, the work's already done for me. I can just put the water in, because otherwise that person might feel like, what's the point? I'll just spend the money on wine instead. It's already done. And I feel like this is kind of the next evolution. I think this is what everybody's aiming for, which is to have that final product. We can't have it in a bottle yet, the way that wine is, but having that final delivered product where you have control over all of the elements and you deliver the flavor. And I feel like this is what it's trying to reach for,
Yeah, it's interesting. This is a real question for me. Can you mess up instant coffee at all? Because you still have to add water, right?
You still do.
It's still not totally, I see that it's much safer than having to grind coffee and brew it.
And weigh it, and it's one step away. It is true.
Yeah.
One, you could put cold water in it.
Yeah,
like what happened to you.
That was my example. I was like, it still could taste bad.
Totally, it could be bad water.
Yeah.
And I had it. I tasted it, and I brewed it according to the instructions, and it still felt like very light, body wise. Like the flavor and nuance was there, the aroma was there. But it was super light. So even then I still felt like I needed a second chance, like I want to put less water in. I want less water. Maybe that'll make the body better, make it thicker.
But then you have to pay another $80, right?
Another $80, yeah.
It's an expensive mistake.
Expensive mistake. And I did what they told me to. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting idea and perhaps going in the right direction, and it's obviously adding value perception to coffee, which I think is good for specialty in general.
Never opposed to that, right? Yeah. Or at least, I'm never opposed to that. Do you know much about the environmental, and I really don't, I'm not teeing up an argument. I don't know of producing these coffees, like the environmental impact of turning coffee instant and the packaging that it requires and all that?
It's a great question. Well, for this one specifically, they came in like glass vials.
Okay.
So glass is good. That's recyclable material. That being said, they were packed in like a type of foam inside of a metal container.
Okay.
I don't know what the foam was made out of. So that's one thing. And then the actual process of making instant coffee, theoretically, there's a few different proprietary versions of this, but basically they're brewing the coffee and then dehydrating it. Is basically what's happening. And I'm not 100% sure what the environmental implications are for that. I think that's something to investigate. Yeah, and I have a research project.
There you go. Thank you. Come back to me.
Thank you. Give me homework.
Yeah. No, and I'm seriously curious. It could be that it's better or it could be worse. I don't know. It's a lot of talk about getting rid of single use, and yet I can say we're doing some single use stuff coming up at my work, and I am fine with it when I reviewed the actual environmental impacts of how it was being done and all that. So there's no cut and dry answer. And I also want to sell coffee in the same way that they do. And if certain people that I want in my consuming base want to consume it in a certain way, I'll put it in the right single use for them if that's what's going to work for people to drink it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Again, you're just making me think about the impact. And if they're brewing it and then dehydrating it and then you rehydrate it, essentially you're using twice the amount of water to brew it. Yeah. So that's something. The kind of micro ground stuff, like what you can get at Starbucks, and even the Swift version of kind of the specialty instant that people are doing, that at least is just, I don't think they're brewing it first. I think it's just a kind of micro ground solution opposed to the crystals. So I'm going to investigate. I mean, you've given me homework assignment. I'm going to come back on it.
Oh, good. Thank you. You can go to ChatGPT, see what they say.
Get some
You could have a report for me in about 10 minutes, probably.
Absolutely. I have the full power of the internet at my disposal. Speaking of which, Equator does have an instant solution, but they have like kind of that specialty like Swift version, where it's like the micro ground idea. But we're going to switch over to Helen Russell and see what she's got to say about Equator.
Great.
Today, I'm speaking with special guest Helen Russell, the co-founder and executive chair of Equator Coffee in San Rafael, California. Welcome, Helen. How are you?
Good, Jake. Thank you. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. And yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
I was just listening to the podcast you did with our director of coffee yesterday when I was out cycling. It was awesome.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Ted's a great guy. He's easy to talk to. He's
truly, we think of him as the professor, right? He's really, totally professorial. I've been listening to your podcast. I sent Jonathan a note at Joe. I said, "Oh, what a great podcast." He said, "Thank you." I love him.
I suppose first question is, what is your daily coffee routine or ritual?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning because I knew you would ask. So absolutely pour over for me. So I come down every morning. I set it up the night before. It's funny when I get everything set up, the dog begins to go upstairs because she knows it's time we're leaving. We're going upstairs to bed. So I definitely love a pour over. I pop into the roastery and I'll pick up whatever single origin that we're roasting that day. And it's kind of funny to kind of see how my palate has evolved over the last 28 years, where I was really like a dark roast, and now I'm really totally looking at the single origins now, and I really like a lighter roast. I really like to think about the flavors that I'm tasting. So, yep. So this morning, I think I had the Queen Katara from Sumatra. So that was my pour over with the fellow kettle and the Hario. That's it. I mean, it's pretty basic, and 1 cup a day. And in the afternoon, I have a Breville Pro on my counter, and I will go in and I will pull a shot about 3:00. Of the Tiger Walk Espresso, and it's kind of wrap up the day a little bit. So
nice. I like it. I'm the same way. I got to have that morning cup, and then afternoon, like basically right after lunch. That's when I need that espresso or that second hit.
Yeah, exactly.
So you and Brooke McDonald founded the company together in 1995 in Marin. Why? What was your background and what led you to coffee and straight into roasting like that?
No, it's really, when I think back on it now, Jake, it's amazing to me that it's been 28 years. I met Brooke in 1989. Not only is she my business partner, but she's also my life partner. And I met her, and I was living in Boston selling voice and data networks and sitting up at the Prudential. And my first exposure to specialty coffee was when Coffee Connection opened at the Prudential Center. Of course, George, right?
Very cool.
And I would go over to, I would go downtown and buy the beans on the weekend, like on Sunday, and bring it back because I grew up drinking Dunkin' Donuts. So when I came out to California and I met Brooke, and then I said, "Oh, I really want to move to San Francisco." And I told my boss, I said, "Can I transfer MCI out to San Francisco?" And I said, "I've met somebody." And he says, "What's his name?" And I said, "His name is Brooke." That's how it started. So I came out here. So Brooke and I always wanted to own my own business ever since I was a kid. No reason why. I don't know why. There's no entrepreneurs in my family. I was the first one to go to college in my family. I went to Northeastern University. And I always thought, I'm going to own my own business. And when I met Brooke, and we were in our early 30s, I thought, she had what I could tell, like this passion for coffee. I remember when I did move in 1989, she took me to Spinelli Coffee, which is in San Francisco and the Castro at the time. And then I moved to Mill Valley, and then I came down to the roastery on the corner, and they were roasting coffee, and there were sacks of beans. And growing up with Dunkin' Donuts, right? And even before that with Sanka, Dunkin' Donuts, and then graduating to Coffee Connection, I couldn't really believe that people would travel to Origin and buy this amazing product with this amazing story and then roast it right there and give it to you in a bag in downtown Mill Valley. So Brooke and I were thinking about like, what businesses can we start, right? So we decided I sold my stock in MCI. We went to the Northwest and we saw the whole specialty coffee thing happening. And we had about 30 units eventually little small units up in Portland and up in St. John. And Jake, we were sitting in Pioneer Square on the ground in front of Starbucks. Brooke had just got an espresso. I got a mocha. She was telling me about all the flavor profiles, the viscosity. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right? I'm going to go get more whipped cream. So I came back and I'm having a mocha. And I said, you know what? I love business. You love coffee. Let's go back to the Bay Area. Let's write a little business plan and open up a coffee shop. And when you're 31 and 33, that makes amazing sense to you, right? So we go back to the Bay Area and we ended up opening up 2 coffee carts, one in Oakland and one in San Francisco. And it took us forever to really identify who our coffee roaster would be. And Brooke really wanted to roast coffee. And we finally chose a roaster. And they wouldn't tell Brooke anything about the product. She would say, well, where's the coffee from? Tell me how much you're paying the farmers. And he was like, why are you asking me all these questions? Central South America, East Africa, Indonesia, that's all I'm going to tell you. And so then we spoke to a friend who had a restaurant in San Francisco on Florida Street with a Probat. And we said to her, where are you getting your coffee from? And she said, Erna Knudsen. We were like, really? And so Brooke said, can you teach me how to roast? So she started roasting there. So I said to Brooke, look, let's sell these 2 locations, right? We had them for about a year and a half. And let's start roasting. So she bought a little Petrocini tabletop roaster in a garage in 1995 in Corte Madera, California. She was buying green coffee, Jake, from Dallas Coffee Roasters.
Oh, wow.
In New York.
Yeah.
In New York, where you could get 5-pound bags of green coffee from all over the world. And I remember, she set up this exotic rack and she had her pull espresso machine and she had her tabletop. And then she started to put the blends together, right? And started cupping and tasting. Now, she had traveled all around the world as a child. So she really had an amazing, incredible way to really taste coffee. Right. She would tell me stories about sitting in the Castro at Cafe Flora across from Harvey Milk. And just, it was like that cafe experience that she really longed for and wanted. And I think that was really sort of when we flash forward to the having retail stores, sort of how she thought about community and connection at that time back in the early 80s. So sold those 2 locations. She set that up. And we named the company Equator because coffee and tea is grown along the equator. And we chose the Bengal tiger because we're women owned. And we're buying a lot of coffee from Sumatra. We still are. She was buying coffee from India. an India monsoon blend. She put together her Cobra espresso. I remember that. And she chose the Bengal tiger. She said, we're women owned. I want to choose the Bengal tiger as our icon for her rarity, grace, and power. I said, yeah, let's do that. Right. And so, I came in, I started cold calling. I got the Business Exchange Bureau leads. And the first customer I called was Cafe Sapore on Lombard. I said, hi, I'm Helen from Equator. We just started roasting coffee. And he said, great, come on down. And that's kind of how we started. We built the company the first 15 years just doing wholesale. And if we hadn't had those espresso carts, if we hadn't already, purchased espresso equipment, brewing equipment, understood a P&L, how to lay out a bar, put together a menu, what type of water filtration do you need, all those things, which were so helpful when we started Equator, that I could just focus on wholesale. And at that time, Brooke was only 5 women roasting coffee in the United States. There were only approximately 30 coffee roasters on the West Coast in 1995. And you look at the explosion since then with the co-roasting spaces. So very, very humble beginnings. We kind of made a decision, we're going to do this for 5 years. And if not, we're going to have to go get jobs. So that was scary because I'm
Nobody
basically, no one
wants
wants that. I'm kind of unemployable, to be honest. So that's kind of how it started. Just one foot in front of the other.
There's so much crossover here. It's really interesting. I started in Boston as well, and I'm friends with George, and Dallas Brothers at one point was a client of mine too. So it's like we've had so many intersecting paths. It is crazy.
Yes, we have.
But you have such an interesting beginning, and going through the coffee cart process. Yeah, like being able to do the menus and understanding how it works. That's like a paid education. It's like you give yourself a crash course, and then that gives you the ability to support your customers when you start getting into wholesale and working with other restaurants and cafes and things like that. And then the garage roasting, which of course I love, that's like the classic, kind of startup story. Classic. And I had started roasting in my mother-in-law's laundry room.
Really?
Which she was very gracious. She wasn't there for half of the year, so I was allowed to do it. And then when she came back, I had to move into the basement, but that was okay. And it was the best because I had a record player there, and I'd come upstairs when I was done, and there'd be sandwiches waiting. So it was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
And I was just serving like little local cafes in my area, but that was part of my experience in learning roasting. Now, were your first customers grocery or restaurants, or kind of who were you focused on?
That's a great question. Because in the beginning, we were focused on cafes and bakeries, right? So how we thought about this and how I thought about it was I started writing articles for the trade magazines, right? Fresh Cup magazine. How to choose your roaster, what cup sizes, what espresso machine should you buy? You should really buy your espresso machine from your roaster because you have a symbiotic relationship. Should you use syrups? How do you negotiate a lease? How do you choose a location? So every month I had like 12 months of that. And I remember I took out an ad in Fresh Cup and it said, we don't just sell coffee, we sell success. So our bread and butter was the owner operator, where we could sell that group, that person, that couple, an espresso machine. They always bought the brewing equipment, the espresso equipment. So there would be a margin. And our unique selling proposition was that we are going to open with you your first 2 days. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure you're successful. Because I remember when we opened the carts, I hired someone as a consultant for $5,000 to just be there that day to help us out. So I sold espresso equipment, brewing equipment, water filtration. I sold refrigeration. I sold everything to keep the company going. And because of that sort of mental strategy, I guess, I don't even know if it was a mental strategy, but it was, right now, because of that, we own the roasting facility that we're in. Because of all the equipment that we sold early on, espresso equipment, brewing equipment. And it wasn't until about 10 years in, Jake, where someone would say to you, hey, if you give me all the equipment, I'll go with you. And I'd say, wait, whoa. I will sell you the espresso machine and I will loan you the brewer at an upcharge. And they're like, oh, okay. And then show them the math. So, wholesale is something that has built the business, has given it its underpinnings for all the things that we've been able to do for the farmers and the impact and our employees and all those things. So I love wholesale. people say to me, oh, I don't want to do wholesale. I said, no, wholesale is part of this omni-channel business that you have to have in order to be successful in this business. Because with COVID, we've seen it, right? If we didn't have wholesale, retail, direct to consumer, grocery, instant equipment, I don't know what would have happened. Overnight, we lost $7 million overnight, March 17, 2020, for all the coffee we were selling to tech campuses.
Wow.
That 1,000 pounds that was going to Google and Twitter and Slack and all those folks went to zero overnight. So all those 5-pound bags in the roastery went to little 12-ounce bags, right? And if we weren't able to pivot hard to grocery or direct to consumer, so wholesale is anybody who's thinking about getting into this industry, with the knowledge that you have and the curiosity that you have, helping people be successful with your product is really, really important.
Yeah, and you were functioning kind of as a consultant as well. Like you were helping them to build their business, which most people don't want to get involved in. Most coffee companies don't want to get involved in refrigeration equipment and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And you were really willing to scrap it out and be that support for them, which is a huge thing. And then, like you were saying about loaning equipment, that's kind of very much been the European Italian model of supplying the equipment, and that's part of how they get their hooks in you for a long time. So the idea that you were able to sell all that stuff and be able to make your money right from the beginning, I mean, that goes to the health of the business, which is really impressive. And this kind of customer care, is this the proposition that got you to Thomas Keller, who of course is regarded as one of the best chefs in America, and the French Laundry is widely regarded as one of the best restaurants. Yeah, how did that relationship form?
Yeah, I think about that and I just got goosebumps. I mean, that has been 22 years.
Yeah, it's amazing
that we have been working with Chef Thomas Keller. And I remember that as we were building the company, we started out in Mill Valley. We owned a townhome in Mill Valley, and we had to sell the townhome. Then we were renting in Larkspur for a year. Then we moved to Yountville, which is where the French Laundry is located. And all that time, sort of all the equity, trying to sort of get a larger roaster, buy another machine, get a grinder, all those things were to really put more money back into the business. And we ended up in Yountville, and I was also living part-time in Berkeley. Brooke's sister had a little cottage on her house, so I would work in San Rafael during the day, go out and do my sales calls, and then go to Berkeley at night. And on the weekend, I would go up to Yountville. And we had our coffee at Gordon's, which was a wonderful little cafe at the time. And then Chef Keller went in there with Laura Cunningham, who's his partner, and they would have their meetings there. And I can remember where I was sitting, because I remember walking around that weekend. I said to Brooke, God, if we could just have like a well-known chef, right? That would really help us and put it on the map. We could really borrow from that branch, right? And a lot of people who are listening to this podcast perhaps don't even know who Chef Keller is. And I recommend that they take a look. I just heard a podcast with How I Built This, which was amazing with him on there. Talk about a blue collar guy who has gone to the pinnacles and all the work that he has done. But sorry, I'm just so impressed with him. So the next thing you know, Laura Cunningham calls, and I'm sitting at my desk. Brooke is roasting, Maureen's doing invoices, and then we all run out and start packing boxes, right? And it was Laura Cunningham. She said, oh, this is Laura from the French Laundry. Now, I just was talking to Brooke about this, right? And I said, hi. And she said, Chef Keller just had your coffee at Gordon's, and we'd like you to come up and chat with us. So I said, oh my God. So I ran out and told Brooke. So we go up, and we're sitting out in the garden at the French Laundry with Thomas and Laura. And they had a local roaster, and they also had Ely, because Thomas had a relationship with Dr. Ely. And he showed me the equipment, and it was a big brewer, and there was a lot of scale on the hot water tower, and the Gump French presses were breaking, Laura said. And he said, Helen, can you give me like the smallest brewer possible? This is before pour overs. This is before all the things that you would put in that coffee brewing station. Number one, I was so impressed he had a coffee brewing station. And one of the captains, that's all they were focused on was the coffee. So I said, absolutely. And then he started to talk to Brooke about coffee. And then he said, could you put together a blend for me? So she went back and she worked on a couple of different iterations. We went back up and did some cuppings. And he said, I would really like a little bit more mouthfeel, a little bit more chocolate. She went back again, and then the French Laundry blend was born. And I would deliver that coffee every Friday night on my way home. And I would clean all the equipment once a week. And that's how it started with Chef. And he would see me underneath there changing water filters and bringing the coffee. And I remember looking back one day and I saw his slacks and he said, Helen, what are you doing down there? I said, oh, Chef, I'm changing the water filter. He said, is it due? Next thing you know, all these other slacks started piling up behind him. The whole team was like, a chef's in there. Something must be going wrong. He said, oh, it's Helen. She's just changing the water filtration. So it's sort of that, that high touch of wholesale, right? In order to be in the wholesale business, you really have to be high touch. You really have to let your customers know you're experts in your field, not only just in coffee, but in the preparation of coffee and how you train, how important the water is, all those elements, and how important it is to bring fresh coffee. So we were completely early on in that. I remember our coffee was so fresh. When we got Joie de Vivre Hospitality, which was one of our first hospitality groups, it was like 15 locations. And the coffee was so fresh that Brooke and I had to, it was all we had was the bun, right? The bun air pot brewer. We had to drill holes in the spray head to go from 5 holes to 8 holes to 9 holes just to give us more of a bloom. Yes. So those are the kind of things that we geeked out on and got into to kind of do this thing. And a funny story there, I remember Amy Lewis, she worked at Pete's Coffee. She was at Starbucks at the time. She picked up Howard Schultz at the airport and he said, how did we lose Joie de Vivre Hospitality? Who is this Equator? You need to go find out who they are. So she shows up at our little roasting facility. She looks in and she said, hi, did I just lose Joie de Vivre Hospitality to you? It's like 3 of us in there. I said, you did, come on in. So we've been friends ever since, which is kind of funny. But, that attention to detail, having a great story, having an amazing roaster, having Brooke roasting that coffee, buying that coffee, bringing her out, doing that education, putting in the equipment, doing the training, making sure, that high touch coffee education is there. It really works in wholesale. We built this business on it. So there's so much more to it, but Chef Keller, 22 years. So then came the TK Espresso, then came the Bouchon Bakeries, the Bouchon Bistros. We've got a Bouchon Bistro that's opening up in Coral Gables in the next 4 to 5 weeks. And Morgan Sullivan, who's our coffee trainer and educator, will be out there for the entire week training.
Keller is one of those clients that, you can build the business on, because that becomes the lighthouse client that basically has minted you as saying, this is quality. If it's in the French Laundry, then you're automatically quality. So the rest of the conversation is just, what are you doing for me and what's the price? And, it's funny you bring up Bouchon because that's basically how I first got to know Equator. I was working in wholesale with La Colombe in New York City. And Thomas Keller had the bakery, had Bouchon in the Time Warner building. And I would go in there and start knocking on the door. I was trying to take the client from you, full transparency. And, but they weren't having it. And so I got really interested because they were so not interested in talking to me. And I was like, how could you possibly be this upset with my charm? And
exactly.
But I thought this is really remarkable loyalty. And so I started investigating Equator, and then I got into the coffee and the story. And that was the beginning of how I got to know you. And because I had to know what this company was that had made itself so indispensable. So I always thought that was really amazing.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And you were young when you started the company, and I find that a company that is created kind of in an organic fashion by the owner operators and the same leaders are in the same place often kind of can grow in odd directions. And sometimes the roots get twisted a little bit. And I was interested in, how did you evolve as a leader, and how did you evolve the company from those early days to the healthy organization that Equator is today?
Yeah, I mean, it really took the 3 of us, myself, Brooke McDonald, life partner, coffee roaster, Maureen McHugh. I mean, that emotional intelligence. Maureen came in early on in 1995 and said, what are you all doing in here? And I said, oh, we're starting a coffee roasting company. And it had these bizarre espresso machines all over the floor, right? And she said, oh, I'd like to join. And I said, yeah. I said, you know what? You were 12 years at Catholic school in the Bronx. I said, you probably know math. You can do the invoices and the operations. I'll do the sales. Brooke is going to do the roasting. So it was really the three of us. Any successful business, Jake, you need three components. You need people, product, and process. And everyone that I mentor, everybody I talk to, I describe that to them and I say, which one are you? And they think, I'm 100% product. And I say, well, that's great. Well, who's going to help you get it out the door? And then who's also going to help you bill for it? Well, I'm a little bit operations. So what percentage of operations are you? So I said, you need to add to your team. And we were just lucky that we had the three of us. And early on, our vision was to really make sure that, we took care of the farmers. I mean, Brooke was early on, the direct trade, going to Guatemala to visit and get, dirt on her boots. And we're, women owned, very quiet about it, right? Heads down. I think if Brooke had my personality and was an extrovert, we'd all know more about her, right?
Right.
You said, you worked for La Colombe and your founder was out there doing documentaries and doing all those things. And Doug Zell was out in the field and everyone, and we were just one foot in front of the other, putting business on, making sure that we had good financial stability. We brought in the right people. One thing about myself personally as a leader in this company is I really know what my strengths are and I really know what my weaknesses are. And I have no problem with my weaknesses whatsoever because I know that I have to fill them in. So early on, we had a great bookkeeper, we had a great accountant that really gave us that financial hygiene that we needed to understand what we could and couldn't do. We weren't building out budgets, right? I didn't know how to put together a budget. All I knew was like, Brooke, what are you paying for this coffee? What is it after shrink? What are our expenses? How much do we have to sell? This is what we need to make. And in the beginning, we were selling coffee wholesale for $4.50 a pound. When you think about it now, and we were just holding up our fingers thinking, yeah, 450, I think that's right. I think that should be good, right? So, I think we were all very curious. We all had our own strengths. We all had our own areas of interest in the company. And together we really built something that we're very, very proud of, that has been able to really withstand the test of time. And I think I'm confident. I don't, when I say I think, what I mean is that I'm really confident that the sort of the platform that we built to bring people into the company and the promise of we will give you everything that we have, whether you're here for 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. So when you get off into specialty coffee, you will always look back on this experience, that we were fair, that we were helpful, that we were accessible, that we were in your corner. And we have seen so many careers that have taken off. I remember when Caitlin McCarthy Garcia came, she was one of the first women mentors that Brooke had in the roastery. And I remember at the time she told us that, she was college educated. I think she went to Santa Cruz. And she said she was working for Pete's, but the only way she could get into the roastery there was to deliver the mail. And Brooke was like, no, you're going to get on the floor right away. We're going to start cupping. We're going to start talking. We're going to start working with you. And that's what Brooke did. And of course, Caitlin went on to become an amazing roaster, a great green coffee buyer at Royal. And seeing a young woman like that with such promise and putting your arm around them and saying, we're going to help you get to the next level, and not feeling competitive about it or you need to stay here. We know that you come in the front door, we want you to go out the back door. We want you to keep coming in and keep moving along, which I've always said to everybody on my team. If you're going to leave, just let me know and I'll help you get your next job, because I can pick up the phone and call anybody. And if you've given me 110%, I will get you a job wherever you want to go, right? Bring your expertise and then keep going. And some of our folks, as you know, Devorah Freudiger has been here for 12 years. Jesse has been here. Ted's been here. And to see them as young coffee people, from baristas to account managers to roasters to green coffee buyers to parents and purchasing homes, has all been because of the platform that we have built to allow them to do that. So early on, it was about lifting all boats, whether it be at Origin or it be at the roastery. They're really trying, we weren't perfect, but I got to tell you, our intention has always been perfect, to take care of the people around us.
You kind of segued right into something that I did want to bring up, which was, I visited your roasting works in San Rafael last year, and
Yep.
I've gotten to know some of your team over there, like you said, Devora and Ted Strachura and Michelle Fleming,
Yep.
and some of the people at the Roundhouse Cafe. And one thing I notice is that they are all very happy with where they work and the work that they're doing. And when I asked Michelle, where she wanted to be in 5 years, she said right
Yes.
here. And she still wanted to
Wow.
like push herself and learn more and grow professionally, but she was happy being in the company and in the Bay Area. And I just wanted to know, like, what is it that you do to make people love where they work and want to stay? And I mean, you're answering part of that, but to get people from just being happy with a paycheck and feeling like this is a good, safe
Yeah.
environment, like what is it that's bringing that extra level of loyalty?
Our team is so excited about LGBTQ plus us, and it's like, look, we will protect you, all that's going on in the country. We just had our Tour de Equator ride yesterday, a pride ride that I led, and one of the stores. And it's just, I'm so proud of how excited our team is about who we are as people. That is amazing to me. Of course, we live in California, right?
Sure.
So there's that. But, like, come on, if you're a barista in Florida, come on out here. We'll set you up, we'll help you out. We'll make sure that you feel protected and safe and honored and bring your authentic self. I mean, that has just been this whole other piece that I don't think I talk about enough because it's just who I am, but that our employees just really, they smile, when they see us. They're like, wow, these two have been together for 34 years. They've had this business for 28. They care about everybody around them. I want to be here. I think Maureen McHugh, who is on sabbatical right now after 28 years with us, has been instrumental in terms of her availability, sitting down with Michelle, for example, when Michelle was on the East Coast. And I remember, Michelle sent a resume in, and Ted interviewed her, and Maureen interviewed her. And Ted said, well, she's on the East Coast. I don't think she's going to move. And Maureen was like, well, let's talk to her. Maybe she will move if we lay out sort of the opportunity for her. And she did move. And having access to the leadership and sitting down with people and talking with them about their careers, because young people have a lot of questions, right? Especially today. There's a lot of questions about where is the company going? You're a B Corp, you're using business as a force for good. How can I develop my career here? And Michelle right now, last week, was at Boot Coffee getting your Q grader. And we were at a leadership meeting a week ago, and we announced that she was doing that. And everyone's like, wow, that's great, Michelle. That's amazing, because she's been there. And this is the next step. And we always joke, once you get your Q grader, that means you're on your way to the next step, which is what we want to encourage, but we want to keep her there as much as we can. So I think communication and sitting down with people and being proactive as opposed to reactive, right? Really understanding sort of the pulse of the business and how people are doing, because you've got retail employees, you've got roastery, you've got customer service, you've got an 18-year-old, you've got a 60-year-old. It's very, very multi-generational. And sort of how do you put all of these things into the pot and make sure the pot just simmers at a way that everybody gets their needs met? And life comes up for a lot of people. And I think as women founders, we're very intuitive to that. And we make ourselves very available to that. And we want to know how you're feeling and, and how you're thinking, because it's no longer the generation that Maureen, Brooke, and I grew up in. Like, you work 60 hours a week, and you work Saturday, and you're in, we didn't have email when we started. I don't know how we did that. I was attached to a headset, but I was on email 24/7, and to be able to say to the team, we understand that you have a family, that you have needs. This is what we need. If you can help us with this, we can help you with that. I mean, so I think just being available to listen, having a lot of things in place on the HR side, because at the end of the day, there's a lot going on, coming out of COVID, pre-COVID, people's careers, where they want to live, and expensive. We live in the Bay Area. It's very, very expensive here. So people who do work for us that want to be here have to have a career path. They have to know where they're going. We have to pay people well above what you would pay them if it was just like what you have to pay. We want to pay people well enough so they can really make their dreams come true and know that there is a future in coffee. I can't tell you how many young women reach out to me that, I'm roasting at this small roaster. We're doing about 1,000 pounds a week. The owner really doesn't want me to leave. I really don't know what my future holds. Can you help me? I'm like, are you kidding? This is what you need to think about, right? You've got a college education, learn all you can here, right? You could be an account manager, a coffee educator. You could be a green coffee buyer. You could roast if you wanted to. You can have a 6-figure income. Just be curious, and work really, really hard, and get with the right companies. But there are no mistakes if you start off with a small roaster. There are no mistakes, right? I remember when David Poole, I don't know if you know David. David was with us for 6 years, and he became our director of coffee. And when we purchased the Finca Sofia down there in Panama with Willem Boot and his wife, David had a master's in Latin American studies. And I said, David, would you like to get down there with your wife and child for a month and help us build out worker housing? And he said, sure. And then I remember, he said, I'm going to be here for 3 years. And I said, okay, 3 years is good. I'll take it. And then it ended up being 6 years. And then he went to Ethiopia, and then he came into my office. And he was so nervous. He was sweating bullets. And he said to me, I have another job offer. And I was like, Dave, that's great, but you're not leaving Finca Sofia. You will still be my farm manager there. And so David now has equity in the farm, and we kept him on. And he's like having an amazing nephew. And he went on to be the green coffee buyer at Farmers Brothers. Talk about because he wanted to learn, because he wanted to learn. And he had all the underpinnings from Equator to work for the larger company and understand what that was like. So different. And then to be able to take a small business and a large business and now be a consultant as you are. And it's like when you're talking to people, how helpful you can be. And you can only be helpful in life if you've been curious in life, and you've been curious in business, and curious about the people that you're selling to, curious about the people that you're buying coffee from, curious about the people that are out at the roastery, what their needs are. What are our customers' needs? How can we help them be successful? What is our last thought at night? That was the joke. Thomas Scullo is my last thought at night and the first thought in the morning. And, it's like I can intuitively look across the wholesale playing field and see who was thinking about us and who needed us. And then launching into retail, you have to ask me about that, because I can't believe we're just celebrating our 10th year anniversary in retail. If you ever told me I would have been in retail back in 1995, after spending 3 years in retail, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, I would have said, you're crazy. But I love retail. It's my favorite thing now.
And I did think it was interesting because you did start out primarily as wholesale after the carts, and then you didn't open your first cafe for years till what was it, 2013? Yep. And so that was kind of a long way to just be wholesale. And what was kind of the impetus of getting into the cafe space?
That's an important question, and a cautionary question, and a cautionary tale for all the folks that are listening. Because when you have success after you've been working for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, right? All of a sudden you pick up your head and you're 50 years old. And then you look around, there's no longer 30 coffee roasters. There's 300 now, right? And they're talking about Blue Bottle, and they're talking about Stumptown, and they're talking about Counterculture, and they're talking about Intelli. And then all of a sudden, La Boulangerie, which was one of our largest wholesale customers, 22 stores, $1.1 million, $1.2 million in revenue, was purchased by Starbucks. And $1.1 million just fell out of the checkbook in 2012. And Brooke said to me, Helen, we really got to get into retail. So the cautionary tale there is you have to innovate as a leader, right? Because you can get super, super comfortable, and it happens all the time. We read about it all the time. In Fast Company, Inc. magazine, anyone I talk to, they say, who was your mentor? And I said, I had no mentors. It was Fast Company, Inc. magazine, and Brooke and Maureen and our customers. They mentored me to be a better leader. That's who my mentors were. But I think every leader gets complacent. You just do. Things are rolling along. Things are going well. You bought a house, you bought a farm, you're thinking, wow, I'm hot stuff. This is great, right?
Yeah.
Next, and then you look around and it's like nobody's calling you anymore, right? And they're calling other folks for a wholesale. They're not calling you anymore. The phone's not ringing off the wall like it used to. So the best thing that ever happened to us was when Starbucks bought La Boulangerie, because Brooke said, we got to get into retail. And I said, you're crazy. I can't get up at 4:30 in the morning. She said, not you. We have Deborah now. And whenever you're a founder, you think you have to do everything,
Right.
right? You just, oh, I'm going to have to do it. And she was like, no, Deborah's going to have to do it. So Brooke had that EQ and emotional intelligence to, because I'm such a control freak. I'm such hard charging. It's like, oh my God, if I don't do it, it can't get done. Right. And it's like now being able to sort of delegate and have these amazing people around us. So Deborah was like, this will be great. So we got this incredible opportunity at a little surf shop at Tam Junction in Mill Valley. I remember one of my sales guys was down there. They wanted to put a little AirPod brewer in the Patagonia store. And he called me. He said, Helen, have you been down here to the surf shop? And I said, oh, that building that, I don't surf, but the building that has barracks and all. He said, yeah, something special's going on down here. So I go driving down there in the Mill Valley, and you go in and you park, and you can smell the ocean. And there's like a little surf camp that's going out. There's a nursery. Um, they're playing music lessons. People are getting surfboards. I meet with Will, the owner. We're walking around. He's 30, right? And I'm now 15 years ago, 50 years old. And he said, yeah, I really would love to do a coffee shop here, but I don't drink coffee. And I'm looking around. I said, you know what, Will? I don't surf. So together, let's build something special. And then we hired Boar Bridges. And Jake, I spent the first year and a half down there, well, cleaning tables and telling our story. Next thing you know, our brand, you could walk into our brand. You could feel that human connection and kindness at the portal of coffee, right over into our cafes, right? And I remember one of the first folks that came in was Biz Stone from Twitter. He lived up the street. He said, oh my God, I'm so happy you opened this. And this other gentleman, Dave Morin, was sitting at the surf table, and he dropped something, and I went down and I brushed off his boot because he was drinking a mocha, and he said, oh, he looks down. He said, oh, you must be the founder. Nobody goes down and cleans people's shoes off. I said, oh, I'm Helen. I'm Helen, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, Helen, I have to tell you a great story. He said, my wife, Britt Morin, said, Dave, we're having a baby and we're moving to Mill Valley. And he says, I'm not going to Mill Valley. There's no good coffee there. Right. And so she said, no, you got to taste Equator. So he said, okay. He says, reluctantly come over. He said, we came in, we had coffee. I went up the hill over towards Stinson Beach. I bought the house. And I said, oh, because so
you should get some of the commission for that, like anyone who's moving there for the coffee now.
So that was the most fun I've ever had, to be able to, I was so proud of the brand and the connection that we had to the community. And whether you were 3 or 83, I wanted to make sure you felt good in there. It's about saying yes to the community. And by saying yes to the community, guess what happened? The wholesale spigot turned back on, because the head of LinkedIn from Global Food Service walked through one weekend, and he called Bon Appetit. He said, I just had the best cup of coffee I've ever had. Why are you bringing me all these other roasters? I want Equator. And so I get a call Sunday night from Marcus Hartman. Can you come down to LinkedIn on Tuesday? I said, absolutely. He says, Joe, I forget his last name, was just in your store this weekend and he couldn't get over it. So retail drives wholesale, right?
Absolutely.
Having access, having people experience the brand, putting all those touch points out there.
That firsthand connection and way to directly communicate and have contact with the customer. And it is the wellspring from which everything comes. And I love the fact that you look at the selling of Boulangerie Bakery as like one of the greatest blessings in the company, because they were one
Absolutely.
of your bigger customers, but it turned you onto this new opportunity and this new path that maybe you would have never found otherwise. So I think that's just a great way to look at things. Of course, close a door and open a window, right? What would you say is kind of the greatest success with this company? What would you say is the greatest success you've had?
The greatest success is the people that have worked for us and have come through the door and that have exited and gone on to create amazing careers in specialty coffee. Another great success is when the team just went to the SCA after coming out of COVID and talking to so many former Equator employees that were so proud to have worked for us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our reputation. There are a lot of amazing roasters in the Bay Area and in the United States, and we're all buying great coffee, and some of us are fishing from the same ponds, right? In terms of specialty coffee. But the greatest success is that we're still here. We're successful. We continue to have opportunities. We're layering the company with the next generation. It's 3.0. We have 2 more stores that we're opening this year. And I have an amazing CEO that I met when he came into La Boulangerie, JP LaChance, as COO there. And when Pascal Rigo called to say, Helen, Starbucks has purchased us and they're a roaster, I said, yes, Pascal, I know they roast coffee. And that meeting, and JP was the nicest guy in the room. He honored all of our green coffee contracts because he knew we were a small business, and if they had pulled the business, we would have been crushed. It would have been way more than 1.1 million that would have been out the window. He also negotiated giving us the service contract for all the equipment and all the 22 stores when they flipped to Starbucks. He also left the chocolate in place and the tea in place until we got to where we needed to go. And then 6 years ago, one of our board members said, Helen, you need help running this company. And I think you should think about JP. And I said, oh my God, absolutely. What a nice human being, right? So JP came in as COO, and then I made him president 3 years later. And coming out of COVID, I put him in the CEO role because we had to build back. And he had the expertise, the desire, the energy to bring this company back to where it is today. The other great success of the company is that making an impression on people that eventually may want to work with you and Brooke, right? I mean, I think he was so impressed on how we handled that disappointment and what we had to do to keep going. Right? That was a big loss at the time. And of course, there's been so many. If you hang around for 28 years, these are all great lessons.
There's so many great accomplishments throughout the years, and you're going to keep producing more of them, which is part of the fun. I was curious if there's a specific challenge or issue that you're dealing with right now that's happening in real time with the company.
Yeah, being to be honest, and I think it's not only with Equator, but being laser focused on profitability, right? We have been laser focused on profitability. This is something that for 2023, we're going to put a stake in the ground and say we have to be profitable, because coming out of COVID, thank God for the PPPs and the RTCs and all the things, and having a finance team that could understand all the things that were going on in order for us to sort of pull from the resources that the government put in. And then how do you take the money that is on the balance sheet and how do you build back? And how do you become profitable again? How do you go from, it's 2020 and your revenues go down and now it's 2010 again? How do you build back from that? Right. And so we have been so fortunate and so well served by the folks that are around us on the finance side and our board and all the folks that have helped us. But making the right decisions and not cutting things that are important to the company, like 100% health insurance for full-time employees, adding in dental, adding in payroll services, sort of mental health access, not only for our employees but for their families. And how do you layer those things on, right, that are really, really important, that a lot of people would say, you know what, we need to cut that. We need to take that out so we can drop more to the bottom line. I'm like, no, we need to add to that. We need to add to people's, salaries, and we need to go out and get more business. That's what we need to do. That is the only way. Selling coffee solves everything when you're a retail roaster. We will be profitable this year. We're back to profitability, and happy to be there, not to where we want it to be. It rained for the first 3 months, first quarter. So you've got folks that haven't gone back to work yet on the wholesale side. You have people on the retail side. The budget that we built We had to take it down for the back half of the year because of the rain, right? So we're building back up to that. So there's a lot of things you have to plan for. Our location down in Culver City in Fairfax was supposed to open 4 months ago. We're still working with inspectors, and we do everything right, Jake. I mean, we have the right architects, we have the right plumbers, we have the right electricians. We don't cut any corners, and we are still pushed out and delayed. So it's things that are out of your hands, like fires, right?
Yeah.
And rains and snows and people not going back to work through. So how do you sort of put all that in to make sure that you come out the other end? So a lot of folks don't do that. They just kind of like, I hope this works out for us this year. But we look at it every minute because we know it's really important, and we communicate that and share that with the team on an annual basis. We have our annual meeting and we bring folks in from the roastery and from customer service and from retail and wholesale, marketing, finance, and we go through sort of the financial underpinnings of the company and try to really drill it down so it makes sense that, look, we need to be profitable. It's important to the bank. It's important when you want to go out and buy a machine that the company's profitable so you can continue to grow, right? We had another full bag Loring on order that we canceled. Didn't need it. Lost the $5,000, but didn't need it. What were we going to do? Bring it in, install it, and So we're back to finally 2019 plus. But you have to be able to just be honest with yourself about what is happening and really try to control what you can and project all of the things that may happen. That stores will get pushed out, that it will rain and it will snow exponentially, and that people are going to lose their electricity and people aren't going to leave their homes. And there's going to be mudslides and all these things are going to happen. And there's going to be another pandemic. I hope not, but there will be. So it's like, don't get over your skis as much as you want to. Try to stay in a way that it's growth that's manageable and you can maintain it. And the people that are around you that are supporting the company financially, and it's banks and it's a bunch of folks, believe in you, that you have good sense to know that things are around the corner that we can't predict. Now, we have arrived there, right? We have arrived there after 28 years. We didn't have a finance department 5 years ago. We didn't have a marketing team 5 years ago, right? We didn't have any of those things, but now we have them.
You have the tools.
So,
and
we have the tools.
It's interesting because, again, a lot of people, and the West Coast was specifically, I think, even harder hit and having a longer time recovering than a lot of other parts of the country. But a lot of people's first instincts, when hit with this kind of situation, is to make those cuts and to cut employees and cut benefits for employees and all these types of things. And you've opted not to do that and instead put more pressure on growing and being future minded rather than cutting things back and kind of trying to serve the short-term gains rather than looking at the long-term picture. And again, I think that goes to part of why you have that loyalty and why so many of your staff love where they are and want to stay where they are, because you're kind of reciprocal in that agreement of, we're going to take care of you and we're going to be here for you. And that's a remarkable thing. Not many companies do that, especially in the States. And so I think it's inspiring to hear that. And out of curiosity, when it comes to growth, you've been primarily focused on wholesale. You have the 10 cafes. And are you starting to push more on the online sales and trying to get into more like catering or expanding your product lines, or what are kind of the main spaces that you're trying to increase the sales?
Yeah, let me tell you about that. As we think about, and that really pushed us into omni-channel, right? People say omni-channel. I'm like, okay. So we've got retail. We want to do 2 to 3 stores a year. We've got wholesale. We've really pivoted hard from tech companies to college and universities now. Really focused on college and universities. Jesse Bladica, who is my director of wholesale, we went to a conference in Colorado. We got a tasting with Stanford, UC Davis, Northeastern, and we're going to another conference in Baltimore. So we're really starting to focus there, right?
Yeah.
And then we're also looking at healthcare. So you really have to identify sort of the channels within wholesale. And direct to consumer, we pivoted very, very hard with COVID, right? We have an incredible marketing team, and our direct to consumer is really growing. And we also pivoted hard to grocery. We weren't really focused on grocery prior. I mean, we had some grocery in Whole Foods and some at, local, Mill Valley Market and a few others, but, we weren't counterculture and we weren't Pete's, right? And we weren't Intelli and we weren't Stumptown and we weren't La Colombe. We did not get into grocery. And that's one thing, if I go back to the beginning of time, I would have built the brand in grocery because we didn't have the stores, right?
Right.
So that's one thing I would have done. So we've got grocery. We just launched our new ready to drink in glass bottles 60 days ago. Fair trade organic, 1% for the planet. We also have instant coffee. We just launched our new capsule compostable for in-room. So we are focused on every channel of coffee. We have amazing people overseeing all of them because you never know when one's going to go down and one is going to go up. So when I look at consolidated and I look at all the channels in the company, wholesale really feeds retail, right? Yep. And retail really tells the story for the direct to consumer, and the grocery really builds the brand. We're launching down in Erewhon in Southern California, right? Why are we doing that now? Because now we have some stores there to point to, right? Yep. And so this is what the La Colombes of the world are doing, the Intellis of the world are doing. This is not new, but if you're, a smaller roaster, these are the things you have to start thinking about if you want to grow, right? Don't say, I don't want to do wholesale. I don't want people, I don't want people screwing up my product. Well, someday you're going to have a kid that needs to go to college. So guess what? You need wholesale and you need to hire someone that high touch to go out there and train them, right? So everybody who has poo-pooed lots of things, guess what? That's come back around, including ground coffee at Blue Bottle, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
and instant. Yeah, they've got it all.
They've got it all now. Why? Because
it's true,
they have to be viable economically. So there's some things that you're not going to let go of the quality of the product or the price that you pay, but the different sort of mediums that you put the coffee in, to really get out into the universe so you can continue to grow. There's just so many ways you can grow. There's 3 ways to grow a business, and you know this, right? You add more customers, selling them more things and more things more often. That's it. That's how you grow a business, right? That's why you don't want to be selling refrigerators, because people only need them every 20 years. So coffee, they need it every day. So that's what I tell my team. I try to entrepreneurialize everybody on my team to think that way. Whether you're a barista on bar, it's like, we have Pride cookies. It's Pride weekend. You need some cookies, right? So
absolutely.
I'm relentless. I'm relentless on the sales side, Jake.
I can tell you have that's the tiger coming out, and it's important, like you said, to have that diverse portfolio of having different channels and having the family of products. And, because like you said, each of them feeds into another component of the business. And that's part of how you expand out of a regional roaster to a national brand. Yeah. And that's how you take it to the next level. And that's exactly right. That's what we did at La Colombe. They started with just a cafe, and then we're super focused on wholesale for years and really focused on hotels and restaurants specifically. Yep. And then kind of when I came in, I started moving them towards cafes because that's where my wheelhouse was. I was barista first. And so I felt really comfortable in the cafe space. And then I learned the hotels and stuff like that afterwards. And then as we created the ready to drink product, that became the national brand maker, because that could go places that cafes couldn't go, and it could get there so much faster. And that was kind of the game changer that turned them into a national brand almost overnight. No,
I'm so impressed with what La Colombe has done. I mean, absolutely. I mean, they're a competitor, if we're selling it in, at a hotel, they're the group that shows up. And I'm very impressed with the way they've been able to grow. You need all those folks around you to make you aware of sort of what's important and what's important to the consumer and the people.
Absolutely right. And I think, the most successful companies I've seen are partnerships like yours, where you fill in each other's blanks, right? You don't have redundant qualities, you have opposing qualities. So that way you can kind of lift each other up.
And in 2016, we won National Small Business of the Year as the first LGBTQ certified company in the history of the program. And prior to that, we weren't out. early on selling wholesale up in Sacramento to the Christian community, I didn't say, Brooke and I are, life partners. They would have looked at me, right? It was like, we were here to sell you a product that you would be successful with, right? And then now it's like, we've been lucky, Jake. I feel really, really fortunate. I mean, I'm 63 years old. Brooke is 66, Maureen's 65. When you work really, really hard and you have a passion and a curiosity and you want to lift all boats and create an impact and leave something better than what you found it, something special happens. When you do the little things every day and then you pick up your head, something quite large has happened for you. And there's no other place to do it as a woman, for sure, is where we are today. So coffee changes people's lives. It's the human story. And I'm so proud to be part of this business and to talk about it and to share it and be at the stores and be so proud of what we've built.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Helen, I want to thank you, first of all, and I think it's a perfect place to wrap it up in a place of gratitude, and hearing all that you're thankful for and the amazing journey that you've been through. And thank you for being so open and sharing everything with me and with our listeners, because I think the Equator story is a wonderful coffee story that people are going to want to hear. And the way that the business is being built and the strong foundation you've created, I'm excited to see where you guys take it next.
Me too. Thank you so much, Jake.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts. A very special thanks to our guest, Helen Russell. Thanks as always for your support and listening. Please feel free to share this with a friend and get more people to listen. Always love to hear feedback and interesting ideas. If you have a guest that you think would be perfect for our show and you'd like to hear interviewed, please feel free to hit us up at info@fnbtherapy.com. Thanks and take care.